The Australian's political editor Dennis Shanahan joins me now live from Canberra. Dennis, terrific piece on the weekend. I mean, I have been saying since there was the spill motion that there is absolutely no way McCormack will lead them going into the next election. I hear a lot of comfort words, particularly from McCormack, but you know, you can speak to these MPs on the phone, off the record. There's certainly no... they like Michael McCormack, but there's no sense he's going to stay. Now, if you look at the forward schedule, the Nat's about to celebrate 100 years as a political party. I suspect he will be removed not so long after that if they want to give themselves clear air before the budget, or do they wait till the budget's happened and do it over the mid-winter break?
Well, Peter, I think that we are in agreement here that it is I think it looks very dark for Michael McCormack. I think the last 2 weeks demonstrated that he was unpopular within his own party room, that he was unable to heal the rifts and mismanaged the promotions to new positions, as well as allowed the government to actually suffer a defeat on the floor of the House for the relatively minor role of Deputy Speaker, but it sent a shiver through the Liberals. Now, I think that all along the National Party MPs have been looking at the Queensland state election as a benchmark and a test for Michael McCormack. Now, what I reported in The Australian on the weekend was what people have actually now, the people within the parliamentary party, people outside the parliamentary party, the Nationals and Liberals, have all come to the conclusion that Michael McCormack, unless there is some dramatic change in character and outlook in the next few weeks, will have to go as leader of the Nationals before the election. Now, that's what they expect. Whether Michael McCormack will do it, whether he'll go quietly, is another question entirely. They also expect that it will not be Barnaby Joyce who replaces him, and that Barnaby Joyce would serve in the ministry for David Littleproud as leader. Now, all of this is a neat package, and you can never take the personality out of politics. But I think that one thing that they would like to give Michael McCormack is steady leadership through their centenary celebrations. And the government certainly doesn't want any more disruption before the budget. But I think that in the mid-winter break, and perhaps after the state election in Queensland, we could again see much more pressure on Michael McCormack to retire to the library where he's being shown by his National and Liberal colleagues.
And the state election is October. And of course, if it went through to the state election, you're talking about the government trying to wind up the year in a better position than perhaps it started this year, and changing the leader in the National Party is never very, is not the desired effect you want, particularly when you're in government. It would have to be done with the approval and sort of the sanction even of the leader of Michael McCormack, that he'd have to willingly go. And I suppose what you'd be worried about there is if there is this orderly transition, some say planned to David Littleproud, with Barnaby being returned into the cabinet along with Matt Canavan. What you don't want is the next 7 or 8 months of Barnaby auditioning to perhaps move Littleproud out of the way. That would be the worst outcome. Some are saying to me it could happen sooner rather than later, and some are talking your time frame too.
Well, I think, Peter, when the people I was speaking to last week as I prepared the story, and I spoke to everyone, it wasn't speculation on my behalf. The people I spoke to were all of the view that the speculation, just the speculation over the weekend, may trigger something sooner rather than later. There are clearly some who want something sooner rather than later. But just on Barnaby Joyce and Matt Canavan, now I think that Barnaby Joyce would accept a ministerial position, not necessarily in cabinet, if there was a different leader than Michael McCormack. And I also suspect that Matt Canavan may not return to the cabinet, that Matt Canavan sees a role for himself, a very important role he played in the election, in winning votes in Queensland, running a tough Nationals agenda on coal-fired power, supporting the Adani coal mine, and a range of other national issues which are important in Queensland, and they're important to workers everywhere. And I think that Matt Canavan could very well perform the role outside the Cabinet and the Ministry, being able to speak out as a voice of the Nationals and have even greater effect than he's had so far within the Cabinet. But again, all of this is down to the individuals involved, and unless the polling improves for the Nationals, and here what I mean is unless support for the others, for the shooters and fishers, for One Nation, the Qatar Australia Party, and that's why I mentioned the Queensland election, Qatar Australia Party could take away votes from Nationals MPs, and that will worry them.
All right, two other issues before we go to a break, and I want to get your views on them. One is this announcement by General Motors today that there would no longer be a Holden brand. Some are saying a Holden brand in Australia. No Holden brand, because it doesn't exist outside of Australia. There's also talk that GM will not sell any cars into the Australian market. It's too small. I've listened to a lot of people, and look, I myself, you know, we had Tiranas and Kingswoods and all sorts of utes and whatever in our family, all of the Holden brand. So there's a lot of sentimentality around the Holden brand, but the truth was we were spending billions and billions of dollars, the Labor government and then successive coalition governments propping up car manufacturing in Australia, whether you agree with it or not, that's the fact. And also Australians, more importantly, Dennis, had chosen not to buy these cars. That's one of the reasons why they were uneconomic. How do you think this is being managed today? Is it sitting on Scott Morrison's desk as a problem, or have people moved on and they're buying cars and they have no attachment anymore to Holden?
Oh, well, look, I have to declare an interest here. My first car was an FC Holden. I paid $300 for it, and I wrote it off driving it in front of a liquor truck. But in years later, I could see that as government after government of all complexions poured billions of dollars into a car industry run by foreigners who demanded Australian government money to keep alive an Australian car industry, which was artificial, and, as you say, in the end, Australians stopped buying the cars. Simple as that. They went around and preferred to buy a Toyota or whatever imported. And that is the bottom line. Australians weren't buying Holden cars. And so what we've seen is the ultimate demise of the industry. I think that Scott Morrison's anger today, as he expressed it, was a bit sort of showmanship. Of course he would have to say that, but the reality is it was the government of which Scott Morrison was part, which actually finally and correctly, in my view, killed off the subsidies to the Australian car industry, and he now has to see what he can do to find jobs for about 600 people. That's the sad part of this. But again, all these job losses have occurred over decades now, and what we're now seeing is the final coda, the end of the Holden.
All right, just before we go, the very shameless Christina Keneally is out today talking about the number of people coming by planes and says, you know, Peter Dutton crows about stopping the boats, but if you look at the numbers, we're talking about 50,000 people have actually arrived by aircraft. Where is all the carry-on about that? Why aren't we upset about that? Notwithstanding the fact that Labor has done nothing themselves to stop people arriving illegally. If you look at the detail, of what Christina Keneally is putting up as a real red herring today, the detail doesn't bear out to hysterics.
No, it doesn't. Look, Christina Keneally has been at this before. It's an old chestnut that oppositions bring up. It is completely different. The question of the plain people is completely different to people who arrive illegally by boat. The people who come by plane have visas, they've been screened, they've been identified, they have passports, and initially they are operating legally. This has been an issue, 50,000 people, yes, over a five-year period, and the number of people, and this is where it really gets, you know, tricky from Christina Keneally. She talks about the number of people, like being people smugglers. The number of people in 8 million cases who came in 2018-19 who actually sought protection was 64. 64 people, not 64%, not 64,000, 64 out of 8 million. Now, this is not an equivalent of the problems with illegal boat arrivals and illegal workers. These are people who overstay their visas. They've done it for decades, and every government has had similar numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the vast majority, absolutely vast majority, 99.73%, go home. There you go, Christina. Bit of homework for you. Dennis Shanahan, as always, thanks very much for your time.